Jeff, we did a number of episodes on AI this year, and I know we've both been thinking about what will its ultimate impact be on higher ed. We haven't talked at all about matter in space, for example, which is Paul LeBlanc's Southern New Hampshire University owned and funded startup in the space that's trying to create what I think he would call the first AI natively powered university. But the conversation I wanted to go back to was the one you had at EDUCAUSE with a bunch of CTOs. And it was around this. How do we decide what we do in-house versus outsource? When is it something that, the technology is something that we need to do versus when is it something that we partner with others to do, be that frankly other colleges and universities and consortia, or say with, for-profit companies, with OPMs, online program managers. We did that 101 a while back. What's the rubric, though, for how we decide, Jeff?
Yeah, and I think the problem right now, Michael, is that institutions are dealing with pennies in many cases and not dollars to try to figure these things out. So they have very little investment dollars they're unwilling to make the cuts necessary, I think, to the legacy business. This reminds me, this is the innovator's dilemma, right?
Yeah.
Right. You know that, right? Very well. And this is something I've seen in my own industry in newspapers. This is exactly what they went through, where they wanted to keep the dollars from print and were unwilling to invest any money in digital. And so they ended up investing pennies in digital to keep the dollars flowing in print. And what happened? They had fewer dollars in print and people ate their lunch on digital. And the same thing I feel is happening in higher ed because we're not moving fast enough. And they're unwilling to make outside investments, or they're willing to do outside partnerships, I should say, right? Where newspapers and many other industries are saying, yeah, whatever, we don't have to build everything. We will partner with others, but they're more worried about their profit margins. Where in higher ed, it's less about the margins. And I think it's more about, well, we could own this. We want to own this. It's important for us to own this. And they're unwilling to go out for that.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, Jeff. And I thought, I'm glad you said the innovator's dilemma, and I'll talk on that in a second specifically. But one of the things that struck me was Evie, who was at University of Florida, had helped start that online program. You referenced you and she had gotten in some Twitter fights or X fights, and she has a funny line in the podcast where she says she was always right, and then now she's at Johns Hopkins. I thought she made some really important points on the show about having a sense of what is valuable to a university and how that might change over time, right? Like what's valuable at one point or not valuable at one point, certain expertise or core competency could change over time. And I think that's a really important point because a lot of places when they, take newspapers, they're like, well, digital's not our core competency, so we won't do that. We'll let, the bloggers and whatever else figure that out. Well,
or Facebook or Google or Craigslist, which is exactly what they did, right?
Exactly. Craigslist is the great example, right? Because it, classifieds and stuff like that supported the business model of print newspapers. They said, well, we'll let those guys do that thing. That's not our core competency. Then you wake up and you realize, oh, that's where the puck went. Should have been, right? And so I think it's dynamic in the university space as well, was Evie's point, I thought. And I thought it was a good one, is that a university perhaps should be thinking about not where the puck is, but let's put ourselves in the business of being able to skate to where the puck is and not outsource that. And the story that I always think of from the innovator's dilemma, if you will, is the story of Dell's disruption by Asus, which was, Asus originally just manufactured the circuits inside of Dell computers for them at a 20% cost advantage, relative to Dell. And a few years into the relationship, they came to them and said, manufacturing is not really your core competency. We could do the motherboards for you as well for 20% lower cost. Great for Dell. They got the assets off their balance sheet. Great for Asus. They get to do more things, more volume. Dell's profit margins go up. It's 20% lower cost. Everyone's feeling good. A few years later, they come back to them and say, assembly is not really your thing. We could do that at 20% lower cost. Great. Story repeats itself. They come back and say, managing the supply chain is not really your thing. We'll do that, 20% lower cost. Come back again. We'll do design. That's not really your thing. You're like a marketing and branding company. We'll do that. And then the next time Asus comes back, they go to like Best Buy and the retailers directly and say like, hey, we build computers for 20% lower cost than Dell. Right. And so, I think the headline from the conversation might be that core competency is sort of a fallacy because what you have to be thinking about the future. I thought Dave brought up a really good point as well on the show.
What services require the deep institutional knowledge or the relationships of the institution?
And I love that Dave said that because to me, what he's basically saying is like some things are really interdependent. You can't just throw them over the wall and some outside company or university without the expertise and knowledge of your internal workings is going to be able to run with it. Because there's not like clean interfaces to easily outsource, and some things like you're going to have to wrestle through the culture and the politics of your particular institution to make it really work and to do the core thing you're trying to do. You are going to have to wrap your hands around more than maybe a core competency minded person would tell you to do.
Right, Michael, I think that's the challenge here, right? The wrestling is key word there at your particular institution, right? This is not the same answer across higher ed, although there's probably a lot of more similarities than we tend to think around higher ed, but it's going to be a wrestling match. And the question is, who's in that match? Because I will guarantee we will go to a campus. If me and you went to a campus and we say, okay, what is your core competency? What requires the deep institutional knowledge or the relationships of the university? And I go to the president's cabinet. Maybe there's some agreement there, but there could be some disagreement. Then I'm going to go to the English department. I'm going to go to the engineering dean. I'm going to go to the students. I'm going to go to the alumni. I'm going to go, you get the idea, right? We go
Yeah, you're
campus.
right.
We are not going to get the same answer. And it's a wrestling match that higher ed has been unwilling to have. Like, what is our core and what isn't our core? Now, I think, over the last 50 years, we've thrown a lot over the wall. Our core competency is not running residence halls. Our core competency is not running dining halls. Increasingly, our core competency is not running IT, right? But I will argue, is our core competency really running career centers? Is our core competency really running finance? Is our core competency really running, keep going down. To me, the real core is the true academic teaching function, the true academic research function. And boy, could we create a pretty skinny institution if that's really what we focused on. Maybe and if it's a residential campus, then the student experience, we probably have to throw that in. But I'm telling you, as soon as we throw that student experience piece in, you are going to have everybody raising their hand and saying, but wait, this is our core competency, right? It's like, at some point, it's like, it's an exercise that is truly, I love that word you used. It's truly going to be a wrestling match.
Yeah. And I think that's the challenge, right? Is like skating to where it is going to be is also the important thing. And it's going to require real trade-offs from institutions, I think, is what I take from your comment, right? Like they can't be all things to all people. They can't say we're going to have outstanding research in every single discipline. Like there's going to have to be a sense of reckoning of this is who we actually are, right, Jeff?
Well, and I think the big piece that has come in here, which is how you set this whole thing up, is AI. Because AI to me has changed the whole equation in two ways. One is it can do a lot of these activities and could potentially, the AI agents could potentially do them better or at least reduce the piece of the university that they're doing. And the second big one, Michael, is I think something we're going to be wrestling with over the coming seasons of Future You is something that I talk about in my house all the time now as my, ninth grader is about to become a 10th grader. I feel like her whole life has been Future You.
That's
here,
scary.
Right? Because she's like almost born, right?
Yeah.
Is what's college for? And I think that's continuing to be, those are the two things that I think higher ed's going to have to wrestle with is like, what does AI do that people used to do on campus? And then what are we here for?
Yeah, I think that's right. And so maybe let me not disappoint you because I think you were looking for me to join your side and disagree with Evie on some things. So I will here. And in particular, where you just went with AI, which is, I think there's a university, I can't remember which, that is building its own AI infrastructure and model, if I'm remembering correctly. And there's the reality that, Google's Chris Hine told us live on the show that Google sponsored.
You're not going to keep up with us. Google's going to spend $75 billion building better AI infrastructure this year, right? That's an insane amount of money and technology that is going to go into the ecosystem.
$75 billion, Jeff.
With a B.
With a B. Harvard's annual operating budget, $6.4 billion. And probably 70-80% of that is to people. So, look, I thought Evie acknowledged this as well, but the thing is, money is not just the money. It also buys talent, expertise. AI is a big thing. Like, if you're a university thinking you're going to do this all yourself, can you really keep up? Like, where is your niche in there, and where can you work with others? Because the talent, the money, the expertise required to do this well is going to be really difficult. Plus, we were talking about the wrestling match before. Universities in many cases are not built for this because of the existing competing silos and a culture that's averse to sort of this, making a choice, right? To make that switch that you just talked about in newspapers. And Evie herself said this on the show.
But I'll tell you a quick story. When I first arrived at the University of Florida and I had to launch UF Online and I was fresh from the federal sector as a manager, I was like, all right, I'll go around and I'll talk to all of these phenomenal enabling functions in a good way to help us do this UF Online thing. Immediately went to the CIO and was pretty much told they're not going to be a partner on strategy. They're an enabling function. I was like, okay. So I went to student affairs and was like, all right, we got to build this whole new student experience, yada, yada. This is right in your wheelhouse. And they were very much like, no, we focus on the traditional 19-year-olds and that's our business. And this is your project. Have a nice day. And so then I went back to the people who hired me and I was like, I thought you said everyone was on board. And they said, oh, you figured out we lied to you, right?
So Jeff, that's a huge issue, right? Like, the fact that her own experience suggests that the institution couldn't get out of its own way. Now look, it's not an excuse, I guess, right? Universities need to get their houses in order. We need some leadership to move culture, as we've written about, and actually make some changes to get them structured properly in terms of their organizations and business models and processes. But Jeff, this just strikes me as like, they are not going to be able to own the AI infrastructure. It's just not going to happen, I think, based on the scale of the investment at this moment.
And